Hafaday and good evening. The Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizen now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were provided to the media. First notice on Tuesday, November 21st, 2017. Second notice on Thursday, November 30th, 2017. For the record, today is Tuesday, December 5th, 2017, and the time now is 5:35 p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on Bill 210-34, which is an act to adopt the rules and regulations attached to Exhibit A hereto entitled The Rules and Regulations Governing the Joaquin Casey Conception II Compassionate Cannabis Use Act of 2013. The committee has scheduled a second public hearing for this measure on December 14th at 2 p.m. here at the Guam Congress Building. We've also scheduled a markup meeting for this Thursday, December 7th, 1 p.m. at my office in Tamuning. And if you need directions to our office in Tamuning, you can please check with the staff and they'll provide you the address of my office. Just some ground rules for today's public hearing. Those testifying will be recognized in order of sign up on the sheet. Written testimony may be read. However, lengthy written testimony should be summarized to 5 minutes. Written testimonies shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the bill. No debate or rebuttal shall be allowed between two persons testifying. You may submit additional written testimony following the conclusion of this hearing. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of this panel. Okay, so again, I'd like to just make the announcement that the second public hearing for this bill, Bill 210, is scheduled for December 14th at 2 p.m. at the Guam Congress Building. And the markup meeting is scheduled for 1 p.m. December 7th at my office in Tamuning. So I'd like to now call up Mr. James Gillen from Public Health. Belinda Seiden, sorry if I mispronounce your name. Danielle Hernandez. Samir Ambraj. Please, yes ma'am, come out. Snyder. Umagat, that's it, Umagat? Would you like to testify, sir? To present our oral testimony, you may please come forward. Vanessa Story, if you wish to provide oral testimony. Okay. So before we begin with Mr. Gillen, Bill 210-34 is legislation that seeks to approve the rules and regulations of the Joaquin Casey Conception II Compassionate Cannabis Use Act of 2013. The rules and regulations that have been attached as Exhibit A to this bill was put together by the Department of Public Health and Social Services pursuant to the law that was initially passed by this body. And I know that it's been a significant amount of time. It's been 3 years since we've not been able to get this program stood up. And so we're here today to be able to move this forward. We're here today to be able to work with all the stakeholders involved and to ensure that this program is stood up and that the government is ready to ensure that the medical use of cannabis is available for our people. I want to ask everyone who's present here today, and I know that there may be frustrations with the government, how slow this has been to get this program stood up. However, I'm going to ask that we please focus on what we're doing here today and everyone's efforts here today to ensure that we get this, this program stood up and that our people who really need this can benefit from it. Okay? So, Mr. Gillen, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be the third time for me, and it will be the third time I'm going to ask you not to give this to this department. Well, some of the reasons for it being so slow is that we have neither the expertise nor the budget, but that's beside the point. You know, one of the things about administrative adjudication is that when the Attorney General's office is involved in the review of the rules and the regulations, they try to make sure that the regulations are in line with the statute, so that later on, if there are any questions about the regulations, they should be fairly well balanced, and the chance of any protests or lawsuits regarding the implementation of the regulations are lessened. I think it's worthwhile. I know you want to move forward, and I understand that, and I congratulate you and Senator St. Augustine for trying to do this, but I think it's worthwhile to revisit the history a little bit. We all know the history of the first set of rules and regulations, and they're eventually not adopted by the 33rd Guam Legislature. And it only seems fair to restate the history of that evolution. 2 laws, and now a third. Put that into a perspective that seems to have been lost by a lot of rhetoric and emotion around what was an attempt to develop a responsible, accountable, and safe system for the acquisition of cannabis and its products to certified patients or caregivers. There is a misconception that the implementation of this program has languished since 2013, when the bill that was developed as the first Joaquin Conception Second Compassionate Cannabis Use Act 2013, it was referred to the general election of 2014 as a legislative submitted referendum. The general public on November 4th passed the initiative by a large margin, and then the certification of the passage by the Election Commission, we began to develop the rules and regulations governing the Act. That already put us into 2015. After expending funds to send staff to Arizona to study their program and to California to visit 2 testing facilities, the staff began its work, which it completed on October 16, 2015. And we held a series of stakeholder meetings and 3 AAA hearings. On that date in October, the department submitted the draft to the Attorney General for review. An exhaustive review was conducted by the Office of the Attorney General, with staff attending almost every review session. By January 11, 2016, the Attorney General submitted the comments and recommendations. With the adjustments recommended, the rules were submitted to the Office of the Governor and subsequently submitted to the Secretary of the 33rd Guam Legislature. A series of hearings were held by Senator Barnes. The department presented its testimony on June 7, 2016. There was a great deal of pushback from a relatively small but passionate group expressing their dissatisfaction with the rules, some claiming they were, to quote, useless. They invaded personal privacy, violated HIPAA, and some other off-target comments, I thought. It wasn't until the close to the end of the 33rd legislative final sessions that a revised Joaquin Conception Act, which purported to strengthen the act, passed without the governor's signature and became Public Law 33-220, and was effective December 17, 2016. From that date until the present, the department has been working on draft regulations, which you now have. What has confounded the development of the new regulations are the requirement of the law that states that DPHSS had to accept application 30 days from the enactment for all cannabis businesses listed in the law and issue patient certifications. To date, no one has submitted an application for a medicinal cannabis-related business. 9 certificates have been issued to qualified patients. There also is some misconception that businesses are being told not to submit applications. That's far from reality. What we have been advising people who have expressed any interest at all is that since there are certain key elements that are not in place yet, to submit an application with a non-refundable application fee and then have to wait until a laboratory is established before you can even start to think about generating your business would have been unfair to the applicant. The major obstacles that we see are the estimated cost of equipping a cannabis testing laboratory, and we think it's at about $1 million, and that's based upon requests for information from two credible sources, the director of the Hawaii State Public Health Lab and the administrator of the American Public Health Laboratories. Suitable location with securities features would have to be required. At a minimum, the lab would need a microbiologist, a chemist, a laboratory quality assurance person, and at least one clerical person. The anticipated volume of around 3,000 qualified patients will never make a laboratory pay for its costs. Investing in a cultivation or manufacturing business cannot be profitable with that type of patient volume. Even a dispensary would have difficulty. When our staff was advising potential applicants for cannabis-related business, we never refused to accept the applications, nor did we ever tell them they could not submit. We had been advising them that there have been no serious inquiries about establishing a lab, and it would not be, in our opinion, fair to accept non-refundable application fees. Now, there's opportunities, especially with your change to allow non-residents, which might open up business for medicinal marijuana travel for Japanese patients. That is an opportunity, okay? And perhaps that might engender the business growing. But I have, at least on 2 occasions, the first iteration of the bill that was passed by a popular referendum, and a second time when the first draft regulations were not approved, and a second bill, and now Public Law 33-220, that the department not be mandated to oversee this program. Now, for a third time, I am making that request. The department has neither the staff, budget, or expertise to make this program work as I hope it was intended. We're talking about cannabis as medicine. We must be in a solid position to ensure the safety of the cannabis products, just as we rely on the FDA for assurance as to the safety and proper dosage of any medicine. We must be able to assure those patients seeking this alternative that they are getting the safest product possible. We also would be enforcing our obligations under the Guam Food Code and various other mandates that the Division of Environmental Health must perform. Should you still find that the department is the best place for the cannabis mandate, I ask you to properly fund it. Not have us borrow from the Healthy Futures Fund and repay it out of some fees that may be generated. At a minimum, we need 2 trained inspectors. It is best to arrange for a cooperative arrangement with a state with a mature, responsible medicinal marijuana program to train prospective inspectors. The question of funding for a testing laboratory and the minimum staffing of a microbiologist, chemist, QA staffer, and a clerical person also needs to be addressed. The initial volume of business would probably require part-time services. And that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gillen. Mr. Gillen, I just have a few questions. In terms of the budget to man this program, has the department put together a budget with the 2 inspectors that you say is needed, plus whatever else is needed?
No.
Okay.
I would hope that during the markup we could do that for you.
Okay, please.
But I'm begging you, don't give this to us.
I think we've heard you a third time, we've heard you now, but we want to make sure that as we look at this, of course, there's other senators that will take a look at, of course, your requests, but as it is, it's with your department. So if we could get a budget breakdown what it's going to take to get this going, I think this will be very helpful in our discussions moving forward.
And I will say this to you, to everybody here. If you insist that this department be mandated to put this program together, you will need another director.
Okay. Let me ask you, Mr. Gillen, if not public health, based on the other states that are running this, where else can this fit in?
Or in a lot of states, the public health agencies do have the main job of doing this, but they also do this in a cooperative arrangement. I know Oregon has, their Department of Taxation and Revenue, because they're just generating so much money. They have their Department of Agriculture. They have, it's a question, again, of resources. I mean, they can put together, most states can put together a program fairly quickly. Arizona did in 5.5 months, and they did it with relationships with the University of Arizona. They've done it, they've had knowledgeable laboratory people who could consult on what needed to be put into a laboratory. We've had I think some concern about whether we could partner with a lot of agencies here and the university because of the fact that there's federal money in there. If there are ways to get around that and do these kind of cooperative arrangements, we may be able to get this done. Okay. But as I said, it's medicine we're talking about. Okay, when you get an FDA tablet, 10 milligrams of diazepam, you can be pretty much assured it's 10 milligrams of diazepam. Okay, when you're buying something from a dispensary that has supposedly, ostensibly, whatever the THC value is, we're not sure. And we know that, things stored over time, especially with THC, may change a little bit, but we don't know what those variances are. And I think the good thing that happened to us is when we had the chance to listen to the consultants from Colorado that were here and the representative from Gobi Labs, it really struck me about how important it is, especially when you're doing concentrates, you're doing oils, and you're doing tinctures, and you're doing all these things. You need to be testing for the pesticides, for the heavy metals, for fungus and molds. I saw on the Oregon website, notices that certain cultivators had been found to have certain pesticides in them. I note that California, which has the oldest so-called medicinal marijuana program, is now backtracking because they're finding that there are problems with funguses and molds, and they're getting a little bit more serious about medicinal marijuana. So, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're talking about using this as medicine.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And in your testimony, you talked about perhaps a cooperative arrangement with the state, and I know the department worked very closely with Arizona. Is that something that was explored back then?
We use the Arizona model. I have with me in the back the people from environmental health who did the first set of rules and regulations that were based pretty much on the Arizona model. Those were termed to be useless and got thrown out. And then I have Dr. Kaneshiro back there who, again, on her own, among all of the other things that she had to do, wrote the regulations for 33-220.
So I guess my question is, is there anything that would stop you in law, or would we need to include it in this bill that would allow the department to enter into some sort of cooperative agreement, not just with Arizona, but with another state that has a program that's effectively being run already? Just to help us be able to stand this program.
I think for training purposes and probably seeing how their IT systems work. I mean, we have one set up that is going to be able to develop that confidential patient database, is going to be able to issue a unique number, certification card. Although, again, in this law, there's all of this strange language, with a lot of shalls. And one of them is that, registration cards shall be optional. So we've been having some difficulties with this, but, we can learn from other states that have more mature programs. We know that we can't send cannabis materials off for testing, obviously, but There are a lot of things we can do with arrangements with other states.
So my final question before I recognize Senator Esteves is the lab, the testing lab. Is it a lab that must be run by the government?
No.
No, but it must be overseen by the government.
It would have to meet the requirements, and the lab would have to be able to perform certain laboratory functions. We've listed it in all of the things that they would need to be testing for. Okay. They would also have to have a secure facility.
So the cost that's being thrown out there in the past, as well as the $1 million, if we were to set up a lab, that is if the government is to set up a lab. Is that correct? Do I understand it correctly?
The government could set up a lab as long as it's all local money.
But if we're able to get through a procurement process, because now, as you, and I thank you for acknowledging that, the opportunities, if we open it up to non-resident, to Japanese patients, because we know there's interest there. Is there that possibility that perhaps through a procurement process we can get a private lab to do these testings for the government? Is that an option? Is that a viable option?
I think it's possible if we can get some assurance that the Japanese Medical Marijuana Association would be sending patients. I mean, there's all kinds of potential here with the Japanese Medical Marijuana Association. I think one time when I spoke to the person, he indicated maybe 20,000 patients. Now that opens up a lot of opportunities because a physician in Japan cannot even recommend to a patient that they seek marijuana. So the patient would have to come here, would have to be evaluated by a physician. So then, again, it's 20,000 patients, 20,000 patient visits at least. There's probably going to be a need for translators. There's going to be need for probably some temporary housing, those kind of. So it's potentially there.
Yeah. So we see the potentials, the positive impacts that we see to the community in terms of the economy, right? For me, from my standpoint, I'm looking at this is if we're able to open it up for the Japanese patients, how it can speed up the process to make us have a better program for our own people that need that need this. And so that's why that was really the drive for us to say, okay, there's that potential to open it up for foreign patients, the Japanese, for example. But we looked at it in a way to make it be viable for, like, let's say a lab, to say, okay, now there's potential. You have more than what you expect from your local community. There's potential of more patients, more business for them. I mean, that's really what it is. But it's all going back to how can we, if we do that, will it ensure that we get a good program for our people?
Well, I think the laboratory is the most significant investment. Even talking with the Colorado people, I think it was Nick Easley, but I wasn't at that meeting. It was at the governor's office. Even refurbished used equipment, he was estimating anywhere between $700,000 and $800,000 equipment alone. Okay, we still need a facility. So if and some people have been saying to me, well, people take a chance. They wanted to make a business decision and they do it. Well, that's fine. But if this business goes out of business because there isn't enough volume, then what do we do?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm just very very concerned about that. Plus, again, the quality of what is going to be medicine.
Okay, thank you. Senator Esteves, I want to recognize you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel today. Thank you, Mr. Gillen, for your testimony. Just have a couple of questions. I do want to at least just go on the record to state that while I'm glad it's back in the hands of the legislature, because I know the resources at public health are thin and you guys have done what you can, I do want to recognize that moving forward would be a little bit more difficult, only because any changes in the rules will have to come back to the legislature for changes in statute. I have reviewed what was supplied and the initial draft, and a lot of it based on the certifications that you guys would be putting out. I do want to ask again, what were the difficulties with establishing the commission, and where were the delays in that
I'm sorry.
with regards to medicinal cannabis?
What were the
So I believe
difficult-
in was in the 33rd, Mr. Chairman, there was a mandate for a commission to be established with regards to public health having representation there, amongst others that would have stakeholders within the
All right,
community.
well, we have to look at the makeup of the commission. Excuse me. The makeup of the commission, okay, right now, we have all of the members that were appointed by the statute, okay, by the governor's office, by, the director, by the chairman of the board of medical examiners. There are still members who are not on that board. They have just a few functions, okay? One of them is to meet twice a year to hear petitions to add additional conditions, which I think is kind of, I don't know, because if you look at item 10 in the definition of conditions that, where medicinal marijuana could be used, it says any other condition that a practitioner determines. Now, I could probably see a patient seeking a certification and no practitioner wanting to give it for a condition. Then that patient would have to find all of the research and the scientific background to make the argument persuasive enough for the commission to add that as a qualifying condition. My problem always has been with that, and this is why I wanted to get the AG involved, is there are only two required physician representatives on the board. The member from the Board of Medical Examiners or designee does not necessarily have to be a physician. But let's say there's 3 physicians on the board, okay? You're going to have the board, the rest of us, non-physicians, making a decision about medical use of marijuana. I have a feeling that's practicing medicine without a license. Now, I don't know if anybody would bring that up as an issue. But, there's some things that still need to be ironed out about that board. The board also has the authority to determine allowable amounts, and right now the allowable amount is 2.5 ounces. That's problematic. As a matter of fact, I saw a draft workup of what became 33220, and there was some discussion there about, well, 2.5 ounces is one thing. That's the clean, no seeds, no stems, no that. That's just the pure herb, okay? And that's a substantial amount of marijuana. But when you start, getting that down to a concentrate, is that going to be the equivalent of 2.5 ounces? Is that going to be sufficient for an oil or a tincture? And that needed to be worked through, but it never was. But there was some discussion there, and then we talked about, the THC levels, the maximum allowable. I still think there's hope for cannabidiol, for use for people with seizure disorders. I'm not, not against any of this at all. I mean, if this is what's going to make people feel better about their condition, it's not a problem. It's just that, again, it's got to be safe. So,
I think that's it, and as you mentioned, that specific citation, that would definitely be one of the advantages of the rules being promulgated in statute as opposed to through the AAA process, is that any other condition determined or recommended by the physician, I think, is absolutely essential for the creation of the program as it matures and we move forward. Because as you stated earlier, we don't want to lose sight on the fact that this is a medicine to help people. And so as we kind of learn, I think it's very important that that commission is in place and they're able to talk about these different things. And the only added aspect would be, as we put these rules, if we put them into statute, is if we do want to apply this specific item onto as one of the conditions that allow for it, then they would have to come back to the legislature for that. But I think having that clause in there allowing that ability for the provider to make the best determination for the patient should be adequate right now to ensure that people are able to get the treatment, and we'll address it as we go along. Just a quick question with regards on starting on page 89 on the bill with regards to the certification of analysis. The basis of these testing, would you say that in your development of these testing requirements that's all inclusive, that this is the standard, or there are still things we need to identify that we should require labs to test for?
I'm sorry, what's the reference, please?
If you were to look on page 89 under subsection 10217, so the subsection starts on page 88 with regards to testing protocols, but the certificate of analysis and what they're going to be testing for with regards to the chemical profile starts on page 89 and goes through page 91. I just wanted to ask, is that, because I understand you've talked to other labs in your research and development of these rules, is this inclusive, and can this be applied as a standard in most states that practice or allow for medicinal cannabis as safety measures?
These are the requirements that we took directly from the Hawaii State Public Health Lab for their certification requirements. As a matter of fact, actually, the butanes we probably don't need to worry, because I think somewhere in the law it says butane is not to be used at all. So, I mean, there's opportunity to make some changes in here.
A couple more questions. Now, with your analysis, as my colleague was speaking towards, in terms of you being the premier agency to work through it, I understand resource constraints. Do you, based on your testimony, as I understand it, the difficulty in moving forward with regards, besides Labicide, with moving forward with the program is primarily with the enforcement?
Yes.
So as of right now, with current funding, and if we were to promulgate or if we were to adopt these rules and the certification process for the different businesses, would the administration with regards to actually issuances of licenses, issuances of certificates, would that be an extreme or overabundant burden on your agency?
We have no funds for this program. We have been using people part-time. We are issuing pieces of papers that are certificates just out of what we have in stock. There's nothing specific set aside. In the current budget, there was $100,000 appropriated to establish a lab. Okay. The prior law that was passed, $100,000 was advanced from the Healthy Futures Fund. We used some of that for the travel for the environmental health staff, and very, very little other than that, except for probably some time that we did in the AAA process. So I don't know whether the balance is allowed to be carried forward from that fiscal year, but we still have to pay it back out of whatever fees we generate.
I know my colleague, or Mr. Chairman, had asked you for the cost. If I could further ask if you could somehow separate the cost and the breakdown, administration versus enforcement, only because if we can find other resources within the government with regards to that, as you said, some states have models where they spread the responsibility around. And so if potentially we had to look at the administration, whether there are more efficient ways to merge some services and remove some of that burden from Department of Health, or whether enforcement could be, we could look at sharing that burden with another agency as well. But if we're able to segregate the two in terms of what it would cost, what you estimated to cost in terms of printing out the cards, managing the program, any type of software you would require, people you would actually need to, training required that you would probably want them to have in terms of enforcing the program, I would like to look at those, either one, if we could divert that to an additional agency, because that's going to help us in the budgeting process in prioritizing resources. So it just opens up the door for a bit more options, so we can try to move this forward. Yes.
We can do that, sir. We want to look at a seed to sale process, so we track it all the way through. We want to be able to say if there's more than one dispensary, that we make sure that patient X doesn't go to both dispensaries and get, more than the 2.5 ounce or whatever the allowable amount is, because that has happened in some states where people have doubled and tripled up on their maximum allowable, and then there's divergence. We try to not have that happen.
Now, the seed to sale, has there been any studies done with regards to RFID tracking?
There's enough of that in the states where the models are easy to
No, but the costs associated.
I don't have that, but simple enough to get. But again, their volume, most states, the volume is just incredible.
And I understand they have a greater volume, and it might be out of necessity, but it would definitely, I think, be noteworthy just to ascertain, because, as I look at enforcement and I'm looking at actual bodies, those come with a price tag. They're not they can't be depreciated like technology or equipment, and they come with a price tag that can go for, obviously, you hire somebody, you assume they're going to retire, and you assume they're going to be paying them annuities until they pass. So I think in terms of cost-benefit analysis in the long run of a program, maybe it might be very, very premature to think of the potential of an RFID program, but it might just be something noteworthy to look into. And I only ask if it's a burden on your office, please refer to some of your contacts that I may not have, that I could state contacts, and I could look at the associated costs with some of the RFID tracking. Because if it might be a more fiscally feasible method, as opposed to having to hire multiple enforcement officers, it might reduce some of the burden, or might make the enforcement a bit more appropriate, so that we can ensure when we do move forward with this business or this industry, that it's a fair application and all the business compete fairly.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you very much, Mr. Gillen. Ms. Belinda Snyder?
Are you finished with me, sir?
Yes, thank you.
May I be excused?
Yes, thank you. And we'll see you at the markup hearing on Thursday. Markup hearing on Thursday. We'll see you then. Thursday at...
It was somebody from the staff. I won't be here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder?
My name is Belinda Snyder. I'm a former school teacher and counselor. My testimony for Guam Medical Marijuana Bill 210 TAC 34 Core. In accordance to Alicia Limpiaco, is the U.S. Attorney for the districts of Guam and the Northern Marianas. The task force, a drug-endangered child, is a person under the age of 18 years old who lives in or is exposed to an environment where drugs, including paramedicals, are present for any number of reasons, including trafficking and manufacturing of these drugs. As a result of this exposure, the children experience or at risk of high risk of experiencing physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, harm, or neglect. Tragically, these children also are at risk of being forced to participate in illegal or sexual activity in exchange for drugs or money likely to be used to purchase drugs. According to the National Institution on Drug Abuse Juvenile Justice System, reported high levels of drug abuse. In 2008, approximately 10% of the estimated 2.1 million juveniles arrested were for drug abuse or underage drinking violations. As many as 2/3 of the detained juveniles may have a substance use disorder. Again, a substance use disorder due to drugs. And female juveniles who enter the system, generally have higher substance use disorder rates than males. Drug abuse and crime are highly correlated in the juvenile justice system. It is estimated that 50% to 75% of the juveniles were under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time of their offense. And in Guam, according to the statistics published by the Prevention and Early Advisory Committee Empowerment Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center in 2011, 1 in 5 youth was a smoker. Nearly 1 in 3 youths were current users of marijuana. About 3% of the high school students had used meth, which is ice, in their lifetime. About 3.4% of high school youth have used steroids without a doctor's prescription in their lifetime, and 1 in 7 youth was a binge drinker. In addition, it was reported that 1 suicidal death occurred every 2 weeks. 60% of suicide death involves persons under the age of 30, and that 1 of the 4 suicidal deaths involves alcohol and 7% involve other drugs. According to the 2015 National Drug Threat Assessment, meth in the principal drug of choice in Guam. In 2014, DNA, the U.S. Postal Services, and Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency seized approximately 8.8 kilograms of meth. What can we do as a community to prevent and address these issues and to help our children? It is critical that there will be a comprehensive community response and active role in preventing children's exposure to drug abuse and better serving children who are victims of drug abuse when it does occur. Meeting effectively the needs of these children requires a multidisciplinary approach involving collaboration among the coordinated teams composed of youths, parents, guardians, educators, law enforcement, social service, healthcare professionals, child protective services, child advocates, victim services providers, courts, community leaders, civic organizations, faith-based organizations, private sector, media, and other stakeholders. It is also recognized that the local problem needs local solutions as a community-based solution-oriented strategy, such as coalitions and engage multiple sectors of the community and employ a variety of environmental strategies to address local drug problems are found to be very effective. Choose a drug-free life. Creating a task force following the Drug Endangered Child Task Force model is one approach. Governmental and non-governmental community stakeholders have also formed coalitions and partnership addressing the issues. According to PEACE, it is utilized. Framework, a 5-step planning process guiding the selection, implementation, and evaluation of effective, culturally appropriate, and sustainable prevention activities. And the Child Adolescent Services utilize the system of care and wraparound approach through community agency partnership and family involvement at all levels for the prevention of the outcome and off-island placement, providing an array of mental health-related services, allowing for the changes needed of the child and family. Throughout the treatment, transitioning from youth to adult services and providing supportive services to strengthen family life. Conducting public awareness and community outreach are also important and effective preventive strategies. The Red Ribbon Campaign National Prescription Drug Take Back Program, the Youth for Youth Life Guam activities and conferences are examples. Trainings regarding multidisciplinary prevention, enforcement, and treatment strategies, and implementing evidence-based programs address substance abuse and related issues are critical. Establishing and participating in life coach, academic coach, and mentorship program provide for positive role modeling and a supportive network. Federal grants to support evidence-based programs and community coalitions are also available, including the National Drug control policy, drug-free communities, support program grants, among others, protecting drug-endangered children, and committing our efforts to assisting the most vulnerable victims, which is our children, the youth, of illicit drugs industry, to essential safeguarding our children and communities and preventing and combating crime. This is again as per Alicia Lintiaco, who was then, at that time, the U.S. Attorney for a district of Guam and Northern Mariano. She also mentioned in Guam Post in 2015, the Organic Act of Guam clearly indicates marijuana is prohibited. In order to change this law, it will have to be brought up to the United States Congress in Washington, D.C. Along with that statement, Honorable Judge Alberto C. Lamarena III, who has created, implemented a therapeutic court in Guam. He established the adult drug court, family violence court, mental health court, and DYA treatment court. Has also addressed many concerns with legalizing marijuana in which he is not in favor. I ask all of you present today, what is your duties as a senator? I believe your role as a senator is to protect the community of Guam and the people. The Organic Act of Guam clearly states the duties of the legislative, which is to make the laws, executive branch is to carry out the laws, the judiciary branch is to decide if the laws are constitutional. Therefore, this law is inorganic, because the Organic Act of Guam has not changed, and in order for this bill to become law, it must go through Congress. Therefore, senators that voted on February 1st, 2014, 14 yea, 1 nay. However, over time, Senator Rodriguez is now leading the hearings, asking for input of rules and laws in order to put forward the medical marijuana bill, 210 TAC 34, knowingly that it is against the federal laws, it is illegal. What message are you, senators, sending out to the community? It's okay to break the law. It's okay not to follow the laws, especially the Organic Act of Guam, which is an agreement with the federal government and the government of Guam. No one is above the law. There is no excuse. The excuses I have heard after coming to these hearings, voicing my concerns that I'm not in favor, I oppose this bill, and it's entirely from the beginning. Yet the decisions was in the hands of Guam voters. Guam Medical Marijuana Policy Form 214, Administrative Law, implemented of medical marijuana program on April 24, 2015, approved by the majority of Guam voters. Senator Roy Spishu revised the bill and introduced it and consulting with the legislative analysis from the Marijuana Policy Project due to medical reasons for prescribing marijuana to recommend not prescribe. Again, recommend but not to prescribe it. Then there were hearings without the public being aware. Later hearings were being announced like in 2 days' notice, sometimes not placed in the public calendar, confusion as to when and where the hearings, along with the time set for most of these hearings were in the mornings to late afternoon. Then the title to this bill, 210-34 Core, known as Joaquin Casey Conception Second Compensated Cannabis Use Act of 2013, then was later changed. Well, if someone not knowing what is cannabis, but knows Joaquin Casey Conception II, probably thought he was running for senator and voted yes. I believe this bill was introduced for personal gain, introduced for other reasons, not for the health and the well-being of the people. Instead, this bill will hinder the community in the long run over time. We now have an increase in ice, meth, illegal uses of marijuana in the schools, in the Department of Correction, DOC, and government agency workers are being caught. And you think by allowing this bill to go through, it would not affect our youth? Wake up. Important. The importation and this is important, the importation of illegal drugs, marijuana. So instead of introducing another drug as legal to Guam, why not help Guam by preventing individuals and our youth from obtaining the drugs? Find means to stop the drugs from coming into Guam and the long-term effect. Have stiffer punishment for individuals caught with illegal drugs, especially marijuana, and parents held accountable for their children's actions due to substance abuse and usage of drugs, including illegal drugs such as marijuana. Therefore, there is no tracking system, no rules and regulation, no lab, then license and identification cards can be altered. Not to mention individuals who are felons, ex-cons, who have their record expunged. There is no tracking of these individuals either. There's no background checks, especially those who have a drug addiction prior.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask if you can please wrap up soon. I've given you more time than I've allotted for everyone to testify. And you can provide that written testimony. It'll be part of the record.
I'm almost done.
Okay, please wrap up. Thank you.
The medical records cannot be released to anyone due to the HIPAA law that protects patient clients from anyone's inquiry as to what this individual prior diagnosis or an ordered part of medical marijuana. Again, I say no to marijuana. Organized crime that has brought illegal drugs to Guam without anyone really knowing what is in the drug. What other chemicals are being used in this drug to allow it to grow? What is the use in the water? What is being used in the water for the drug? Again, no control, no tracking. Schedule Control 1 drug is still illegal. One time, a Vietnam veteran from AGA says it's dope. Doesn't support it on Guam. Good for medicine, what? You can get sky-high stone, dope is dope. Simon Sanchez, high school student, 60% does not agree with marijuana, and they have concerns about the increase of crime on Guam. There are current medicines that is currently being used to help medical conditions mentioned in this medical marijuana bill. To help with cancer, it is in this case, then cancer will be a cure a long time ago. I have relatives who had cancer. They went through the process without using marijuana. Anxiety, decreased paranoia, and so forth. They're doing things that can change the behavior over time. Actually, it is a natural way to change behavior than using marijuana. Cognitive behavior, behavior therapy, you can see a psychologist and other specialists in the field of medicine can assist individuals. The drug marijuana stays in your system for a while, so the government still cannot track those using the drug dope marijuana. I believe this will be impossible to do. I believe Arizona, California, Colorado, and Washington, it has a very hard time to tracking individuals. Review from medical records due to Privacy Act and other laws protect it. The Guam Medical Association opposed to the medical marijuana bill in October 27, 2013. And then this is what they said, quote, "We will ultimately place patients' care first, but based on solid scientific medical evidence that guide us to the treatment and diagnosis of diseases, especially when it requires our signature prescription authority." The Federal Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, on October 27, 2013, has stated, the organizer behind the medical marijuana movement have not dealt with ensuring that the product meets the standards of modern medicine, quality, safety. There is no standardized composition or diagnose, no appropriate prescribing information, no quality control, no accountability for the product, no safety regulations, no way to measure its effectiveness besides the stories, anecdotal stories, and no insurance coverage. Science, not popular vote, should determine what medicine is. The National Multiple Sclerosis Society has stated that it could not recommend medical marijuana be made widely available for people with multiple sclerosis for systems management explained. Quote, this decision was not only based on existing legal barriers to its use, but even more importantly, because studies to date do not demonstrate a clear benefit compared to existing problem. Okay, I'm almost done. Give me maybe 15 seconds. I thought the gentleman, the director, took a very long time. I'm almost done. I'm here today to say you do not need marijuana. For cancer, there's already medicines and treatments to help with cancer. I suggest you read Cancer Hates Kisses by Jessica Reed Silversky. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease that causes chronic inflammation of the joints. There are over-the-counter medicines, exercise, and vitamins are suggested as well. For post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, there is medicines over many years being used to help this disorder, along with therapy treatment, re-experiencing feelings, emotions, usually behavioral psychologists will be beneficial to these areas as well. Again, I am not a doctor, but my personal experience with rheumatoid arthritis, and I do have it, by the way, is taking vitamins and exercising such as snorkeling, walking, swimming, in the sun activities is very beneficial. My personal experience with anxiety due to a high level of stress, I was seen by medical doctors and therapists. I was prescribed Paxil. Then it was eventually changed to Klonopin 1 milligram. Having a good doctor-client relationship with those who helps and understands me, working hand in hand, reading about my conditions and educating myself about these drugs, the long-term effect these drugs will have on my mind and my body over years, I decided to say no. I don't need to take Klonopin. I didn't need to get refills after refills. Instead, I was determined not to take drugs. I began exercising. I was determined not to take drugs. I began exercising more often, doing things that I enjoy, especially with the support of my doctors and psychologists. Not to mention the day I was granted a permanent restraining order from Honorable Judge Fern Paris. It was like a ton of weights taken off of my shoulders. I felt better, more protected from my neighbor who killed my pets, shoots his gun once in a while. He chased me in my house and threatened me, my mom, and other family members. Not to mention my younger years, as I remember about how he was leaving his family, flying off island frequently. Flying off island frequently. Imagine he was unemployed. It was as though he owned Continental Airlines. Yes, he smoked marijuana. I'm sure he might have been taking ice now. He has interrupted my livelihood. I was afraid to go outside my house, constantly overlooking my shoulder. He affected me by killing my pets, leaving them on the road or in my lawn. This man tormented me. During this time, the pain and suffering and trying to recuperate from off-island medical treatment, I was often harassed. I was diagnosed with a mild stroke in 2006. Anxiety due to stress in 2009. A heart aneurysm in 2009. I'm currently permanent disabled. Yet this man knew that I had a medical condition, yet he didn't stop. Till 2015, he still tried to instill fear. Thank God for Honorable Vern Paris, my attorney, my therapist, praying. God is my main source of survival. Through prayers, communion, God feeds us, God stays with us, and God loves us. And good doctors, I'm drug-free. Now I want to work again. I've been applying for jobs from clerk to accounting positions. Anything to earn a living, because right now I'm living in poverty. Especially after obtaining my master's degree in counseling in 2015. I was hired. I wanted to be known that I was hired, but limited term. So I'm trying to get back to work. I am drug-free, and I'm living a life God intended. I will continue to walk the path God puts in front of me, and I will leave my hardships and sufferings up to God. So I oppose Bill 210, TAC 34, for medical marijuana. And I humbly ask the senators to reconsider the consequences that this bill will have on our community, sustainability with the expense of our children on Guam, safety in our communities, safety from outside drug pushers and users, the addiction that it will create and affect when in the wrong hands. The Guam Police Chief Cruz mentioned on February 10, 2017, and PDN, as for the economic impact of recreational marijuana, which eventually would happen if this medical marijuana is approved and in full force. Cruz noted that marijuana is a $6 billion industry in the nation, and it has been in 4 years. It's expected to grow $25 billion. As we all know, because our people of Guam are not stupid. Once approved on medical, then recreational. There is no money in the world that can replace anyone's child. No money in the world that can replace one's family, children, families, and our community. It shouldn't be jeopardized due to greed and money, the devil's harvest. Your child is priceless. Your children's future, grandchildren, and the next generation shouldn't be subjected to thugs, drugs, guns, and crimes. Senators, do the right thing and say no to marijuana entirely. We don't need more drugs on our island. Kill this bill entirely. The Bible 1 Peter 2:11, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, the use of harmful substance used in a fleshly lust. A wise man once said, we are our own destructions. Thank you for your time. My name's Belinda Snyder.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Danielle Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rodriguez. I'm a little nervous. My name is Danielle Hernandez. I am a medicinal cannabis patient and card holder from California. I recently relocated to Guam. I have used medicinal cannabis in the past to help me cope with chronic back pain, generalized anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder suffered due to a history of sexual assault and childhood abuse. I have been prescribed multiple medications throughout my life by accredited psychiatrists to address my post-traumatic stress disorder and generalized anxiety disorder with little success. The relief cannabis brings me from my debilitating conditions is in no comparison to the mild relief I have received from pharmaceutical medication. Thank you. When I was 16, I attempted suicide due to my chronic anxiety. I was prescribed a series of pharmaceutical medications, none of which has helped me quickly or as well as the correct strain or strains of cannabis. It almost immediately relaxes my heart rate during episodes of panic, which are inevitable every day. Without cannabis, I suffer from nightmares, and the lack of sleep added with flashbacks and memories of my traumatic past make it so I become progressively anxious as the days pass. Having this generalized anxiety makes simple everyday tasks difficult to cope with. One aspect that it affects is my eating. It fluctuates appetite from stress/binge eating to not eating at all, which in my case can trigger anorexia and bulimia. It also makes it difficult to shower due to the overwhelming feeling of vulnerability of being naked from having been sexually assaulted, even if it's in the privacy of my own home. Sorry. All of these eventually lead to my anxiety spiraling out of control and puts me at risk of suicidal ideations, which in the past have led to a suicide attempt. The most recurring medication that has been prescribed to me, a patient with chronic anxiety, is a benzodiazepine. Xanax is short-lived and addictive. It also loses its strength over time. Clonazepam lasts longer, but does nothing to help my increased heart rate, and it is also addictive and sometimes not very helpful at all. And in my experience, they do little, if anything, for my anorexia and my anorexic thoughts brought on by anxiety. The pain medication for my back is dulling and addictive as well. I do not want to live my life in a mental fog or haze when there is the option of feeling happy, energetic, and healthy with medicinal cannabis. Cannabis has been more than helpful for these issues every time. From my experience, I can safely stop taking it at any time without withdrawal symptoms, unlike other medications. The only time it was not effective was when I had an allergic reaction to an antidepressant I was prescribed. The reaction to the medication was the most severe anxiety I have ever endured that lasted about a week. Before I finally checked into an ER, I was told by psychiatrists that it was an allergic reaction to the medication I was taking. I had to keep close friends and family around me every day because the anxiety was so severe that eventually I began to feel death was the only way out and that the anxiety would not end. Of course, that was the heightened anxiety talking, and to this day, that is one of my most painful memories. I am thankful that I have not had a severe reaction like that with medicinal cannabis. I had never used cannabis up until these past 3 years since first receiving my medical recommendation in California, and have since been able to live my life to the fullest for the first time. That is, with the help of a therapist I saw every week for almost a year to get past my traumas. When I began seeing the therapist, we talked about seeing a psychiatrist for medication as well. However, they later stated and agreed I did not need a psychiatrist for medication and vouched for my mental stability. Out of honesty to my therapist, I made them aware at the very beginning that I used medicinal cannabis and that it helped relieve the effects of my anxiety and panic attacks. Of course, none of this was done in her office. I only used my medicinal cannabis in the privacy of my own home. That in itself has helped me greatly in getting over my traumas, and in turn, helped me live a better life without the burden of my traumas. It is needless to say, cannabis has been a large component in my journey to recovery. Cannabis helps not just the initial anxiety and pain I struggle with on a day-to-day basis, but the trickle effects that come with it, like migraines, anorexia, bulimia, insomnia, and more. In Guam, without what I would like to call my true medication, I can't help but sometimes feel I am a shell of my former self. The extra effort I have to now put into doing basic things is depressing to say the least. I have spent many nights crying, wishing I had easy access to my medication, cannabis, after 5 to 7 hours of my heart racing for no other reason than the fact that I have chronic anxiety. Day after day, this has led me to become hopeless. The feeling that I should leave my healthy and stable relationship just to go back to California so I can have the relief again. Before I came here, I saw a psychiatrist and I was prescribed medication. However, it simply does not work as well as cannabis does. I find this personally cruel, having to live this way every day. It is hurtful and painful to live like this every waking hour of my life, when I know a simple plant can aid me. I have had 2 violent anxiety attacks in the past week, all of which could have easily been avoided by my favorite indica strain, lavender. The effects of this specific strain are relaxed, happy, euphoric, uplifted, and sleepy. The medical effects of this strain are pain relief, stress relief, insomnia relief, depression relief, and relief of muscle spasms. To my knowledge, the only negative to this strain is a slightly dry mouth. Excuse me. As a patient, I compared that to the handful of medications I was previously prescribed and currently use, along with their side effects, and clearly see a difference, especially in the quality of my life. I turned to cannabis because it allows me to live my life to the fullest, create memories, and achieve my goals. Without it, I truly do not believe I would have made it to the age of 23. As a patient with debilitating health conditions, I beg you all to help me find the relief again. I beg you to look at those suffering with even worse conditions than my own. I know cannabis will help because I have seen it with my own eyes in Colorado and in California, not to mention the economical boost. The cost of cannabis as medication may be more expensive than my copays for pharmaceuticals, but from my experience, there truly is no comparison. The plant itself helps me live my life at full potential and follow my dreams. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hernandez. Dr. Ambrell?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Samir Ambrale. I'm a hematologist and medical oncologist practicing on Guam. I treat patients with cancer every day, and I'm a proponent of medicinal marijuana because it has the possibility of helping some patients, not all patients. I myself have written certifications for at least a couple of patients till now, but I'm against the expansion of this bill to include non-residents because I believe that there should be a patient and a physician relationship to understand the medical condition. In my instance, it's cancer, that I understand what the patient is about, what their background is, what the socioeconomic status is, and what I'm doing to relieve their suffering from cancer with, say, chemotherapy, other medications, immunotherapies. And I know that I've exhausted all available conventional approaches to treatments. And then, depending on that relationship, I may be able to offer them the certification. But I don't think the expansion to non-residents is going to be feasible, and I'm against it. Firstly, because patients need to be staying on Guam to use medical marijuana. You cannot take it out of Guam, out of the, it's an issue with the security and crossing the borders. Most states do not allow residents to use it or take it up across the borders. And again, having the patient-physician relationship is very important to understand that who will benefit and who may not. So this is my short testimony against the expansion of this bill to non-residents, not per se the medical marijuana itself for Guam residents. I am for medical marijuana for patients of Guam, And once we get this off, maybe the next step could be, but at this point, I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc, and I really appreciate you being here. I think that in some of the previous hearings, we didn't have a physician on the table, and so I thank you very much, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to join us in the subsequent hearing we have, and also the markup. So we'll have your contact number. We'll make sure we reach out to you. I do just have a question, Doc.
Yeah.
So you said you did write certifications in the past. What state did you do that
That was
for?
in Vermont, and I have written a couple of them on Guam also.
On Guam.
But there's none available, so the patients are still waiting.
Okay, so you would be one of the physicians that would write certifications?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So, Doc, and we talked a little bit with the director as well about the potential for non-residents, right? And we know a few, I think it was a year ago or so, we did have a group, the Japanese medical group that came out here, was trying to advocate for their patients from Japan. Mm-hmm. I know that they've also looked at Hawaii now and looking at California. And I understand your point of view, that you must have that relationship with the patient. You must know the background of that patient. And I understand that. Is there anything, though, that perhaps if we do allow this, that a requirement could be put into the regulations that perhaps some sort of records must be transmitted to the physician here from, let's say, Japan? And, just something to give you more, to give you more backing, if you will, to be able to look at the patient's history and to really determine whether this patient qualifies to be given some sort of certification to use medical cannabis here on Guam, because you're right, they won't be able to take it with them to Japan.
Yeah, there are several issues with that. First of all, is the medical records are very likely going to be in Japanese, and there has to be a certified translation agency that would translate these into English. Because I have had patients who've come from Japan because they stay part of their stays on Guam, and they shuttle across, and they bring me records from Japan, and they are in Japanese, and I can't decipher them, so they have to go back and have the physicians write it in English, or go to a translation agency. So there's another way, there is another catch that I want to make sure that whatever has happened is truly what I'm seeing on paper. And the second thing is, when I see somebody there here who's come from Japan, and I want to make sure I know what's happened to them, and I'm confident that the right treatment was given. So at least I put myself in a 6 months period where I am seeing this patient for over a 6 month period, and I know that these many medications have been used, conventional treatment options have been exhausted, and then I would be, depending on the relationship, I would be able to say, okay, maybe if you think, and if they bring it up, it's not my practice that I bring it up myself. The patient brings it up themselves, then I would say, okay, if you think that's going to help you, I'll write the certification, and you can try it, and if you benefit from it, well and good.
Okay, so your requirement, Doc, would be at least to see a patient, to see this patient within 6 months? Is that? I don't know if I heard you correctly.
I believe what I meant to say is I should know this patient for at least 6 months myself. Okay. Have the relationship for 6 months at least.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I know you'll be very crucial in the discussions we have moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Margaret?
I never thought I'd be an advocate, but unfortunately, on the 17th of last month, certain things happened to me, and it was very devastating. It hit home. When I lost my father, no big deal. The big C or now I'm in his shoes. I'm only here to advocate for those that can't. I'm not that good at this, But I'm going to try to learn. What I don't understand is Guam is so unique. Why are we annotating laws from other places? We have the right for self-determination. And I guess now I'm in that shoe. I fought for that, right? I carry that burden. But we are unique as a people, as a culture. I don't have all the stories. I don't have all the answers. But a lot of people, the word hope can spark something. And that's why I'm here. I don't feel I'm special. Actually, I kind of feel like I'm lost. Because this is all new to me. I got to read your book, understand your annotations, understand your wording. I'm confused. I'm educated, but yet I'm pretty dumb. But I do know one thing. Knowledge is power. And we need to let our people know if we can help them, we can help them. And I look at you, and maybe you are the vehicle to help us. I'm lost for words. I don't have the right words. I may get emotional. I may get angry. But it's a learning process. And I'm learning. But unfortunately, my time is short. You know how it goes. We all have to make a decision. As an advocate, at least I think I am. And that's a very big word. I can't get emotional. I just have to stick to what I know and get educated so I can help them. Can you imagine having so many people in here, wheelchairs, bedridden? Last time I was here, I said I was in a happy place. I don't know where that exists anymore. It's hard to be one way or the other. And my emotions get the best of me on that one. I guess I don't have much to say except help us. Educate us. Inform us. Be patient. These things I am also learning. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
To Diyos Masi, thank you very much, sir. I'd like to call now Mr. Brad Hewitt, Mr. August Fess, Jonathan Savares, Dr. Vanessa Oshiro, we have others who've signed up here but indicated no oral testimony, unless, Andrea, would you like to provide oral? Yes, please. If you wish to provide oral testimony, please come forward. Yes, I did, sir. Okay, sure. No problem. Mr. Hewitt?
Good evening, Chairman Rodriguez. And unfortunately, you're the only one here from the 34th Legislature. I wish we had more individuals here, but thank you for having this session. And Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak. I'd first like to thank the Director of the Department of Public Health and Human Services, Mr. James Gillum, and his staff for putting this rules and regulations format together. I know that it's been quite an uneasy set of circumstances, and I think that what they've started to present is a good framework to move forward with. And really, we wouldn't even have to be here today had the proposed bill 215-32 been properly debated on the floor. That way, all of these ins and outs could have been worked on before it went to the voters. After it was, should it have went to the voters after all of the ins and outs and the intricacies had been worked out, the bill itself might have met its demise at that point. But here we are today, nevertheless. So moving forward, I'd like to discuss several points that I found in the proposed rules and regulations. For starters, I support the rules and regulations, but with a few minor adjustments. Possible amendments to Guam law and or new legislation created to supplement the implementation of this act. I would like to state that I support the language concerning the tracking system. I know that Mr. Gillum is kind of adamant about having this in his department. And I understand that wholeheartedly. The biggest reason that I would like it there is because of their monitoring system. The monitoring system that we have here in Guam is exceptional. The monitoring system that we have here in Guam is one of the main reasons why Guam does not see the big opioid problem that the States does, especially in reference to abuse and even death. Possible adjustments to the rules and regulations, first off, as Mr. Gillum even had alluded to, is the allowable amount. 2.5 ounces of dry or prepared marijuana. In the proposed rules and regulations, it lists that there's supposed to be a product label that lists the amount of THC, CBD, etc. In addition to having a set amount in ounces, it might be nice to actually have a set amount that's yet to be undetermined in milligrams of THC. This kind of goes along the same lines as opioids are doing now. The doctors are doing with opioids in the States. Whether it's 10 pills, 30 pills, 50 pills, 90 pills, each one comes in a specific strength. So they're coming up with a morphine milligram equivalent. So that could be used here also in Guam. That way when it breaks down, if you have your 2.5 ounces used up, you still have your ointments, tinctures, potions, everything else that's available. That would still give them THC. So it would be better to put a limit on the milligrams. The next topic would be the actual commission itself. In addition to all of the individuals that you have listed, and with the comments that the director had mentioned, I would also suggest bringing somebody on board from Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness, and particularly from the training and education branch. These are the professionals who are the most up to date with the available education to physicians and to the public about the possible benefits or the harmful effects of marijuana. Now I'm going to touch on a quite controversial topic. While I'm a strong advocate of the Second Amendment, there are laws pertaining to marijuana, medical or otherwise, with reference to firearms. On page 146, lines 4 and 12, it pertains to law enforcement agencies authorized to have access to marijuana certification registry. I would like this data system to also go to the GPD records section. This way, any registered firearms owner will be identified and thus required to surrender their firearms that they have registered. Any new firearms registration will not be permitted for those who have a medical marijuana recommendation card. This goes for the patients, caregivers, transporters, and dispensaries. The Gun Control Act of 1968, which is still in existence today, prohibits anyone from possessing guns if they use or are addicted to cannabis. This is a quote. The exact wording of the federal law prohibits any unlawful user or addict of cannabis or any other federally restricted substance, that means illegal drugs, from purchasing firearms, even if that individual resides in a state with legal or adult use cannabis laws. This shared knowledge with the record section will assist GPD when searching individuals who have a card so that there is no mistake as to legitimacy should there be any marijuana found on that individual. I also have some guidelines here for physicians that Dr. Ambrali actually touched on some of those guidelines. And I would like to just go ahead and say Dr. Ambrali is my oncologist. He's a brilliant doctor, and Guam is extremely fortunate to have him here. So I'll go ahead and just submit those in my written without going over the guidelines. Changing the subject now from the rules and regulations, I would like to introduce the idea of changing the existing drug policy that Guam has to strengthen marijuana offenses. In 2012, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime World Drug Report ranked Guam as the third highest jurisdiction for adult marijuana in the world at 18.4%. Currently, Guam residents are allowed to possess less than 1 ounce without a misdemeanor and a maximum fine of only $100. With that high number of reported users of marijuana, perhaps this law should be changed to reflect some sort of punishment as being in the same as being in possession of a prescription medication without that prescription. Since Guam is making marijuana medicinal, then treat it as medicine. Otherwise, the illicit users will continue to use. Additionally, those who do not qualify for medical marijuana card or are rejected will still use marijuana on their own because the penalty is not strict to not offset the perceived benefits of use. Also, each dispensary should have a specific strain of their marijuana on record so as to identify certain certified marijuana belongs to this particular dispensary. This marijuana will be tested in the laboratory to determine the strain and legality under the current medicinal law or if it's illicit. Wrapping up my testimony, this public hearing is also considering what I consider marijuana tourism. Along the same lines with what Dr. Ambrali mentioned, thoughtful examination and consideration should be made to the cultural and legal aspects of marijuana with respect to those who visit Guam. Is marijuana either medicinal or recreational in the country of their residence? Are there any legal ramifications to a visitor when they return to their home country? What are the potential pitfalls for allowing tourists to use marijuana on the U.S. visa waiver program and further issuing visas to those who are not under the waiver program? What if a non-resident from the U.S. decides to come to Guam and is denied a recommendation or has had a recommendation revoked in another state coming to Guam? I cannot support this concept allowing off-island residents to travel to Guam for medical marijuana purposes. When entering the U.S., they pass through customs. Individuals need to be honest with that federal agent, and not informing them of their true intent would demonstrate fraud. Additionally, foreign visitors have a visa that expires. What are these individuals to do once their visa expires and they return home? They are no longer able to receive marijuana, and they will have to continue their treatment as before arriving on Guam. There is no authorized transport of marijuana on airlines or on international transport. This idea needs to be further examined and not rushed into. Chairman Rodriguez, thank you very much.
Sir, I want to thank you very much for your testimony, for the suggestions. I think they're very well thought out, and we'll ensure that we have this considered in the markup of this bill. Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Oshiro, or I'm sorry, in order, if that's okay? Dr. Oshiro?
Good evening, Senator Rodriguez and any other senators that are watching. As I have introduced myself in past public hearings, but for the benefit of the record and new senators and anyone else who has not watched any of these public hearings in the past, my name is Dr. Vanessa Oshiro, and I'm the owner and operator of Mariana's Vet Care in Barrigada. When I came back to Guam in 2010 to serve in this community before I could in good conscience settle and serve anywhere else, I could hardly imagine I would find myself repeatedly before you in this legislature, not this hall, but the other one, now this one, year after year. But having sacrificed so much over there, stateside, to do the right thing here, back home, it has not been an option for me not to speak to what I'm able to, even in so public a setting. I believe every citizen ought to speak with the authority with which each is imbued, and so it is a good thing and very good to participate in this open forum of government. Everyone is indeed entitled to their own opinion. But at some point, decisions must be made for the common good, and those decisions must ultimately be based on truth if the common good is to be achieved in reality. Today, we are faced with a renewed effort to establish rules and regulations for medical marijuana toward a goal of promoting Guam as a medical marijuana tourist destination. My position on this matter is firmly against any such movement for the following reasons. First, the current degree of illicit drug activity on the island. One need only look back this year at all the headlines in the daily news reporting on the drug trade, even within the walls of the Department of Corrections. The Mandanya Drug Task Force has repeatedly reported the seizure of crystal methamphetamine and marijuana simultaneously in many cases in these and other island-wide drug busts, contrary to claims that marijuana use is not associated with harder drugs. Government promotion of medical drug tourism very easily could escalate drug abuse on Guam, as enforcement of any established rules and regulations of the proposed program will only be a greater challenge to our already stretched police department. Everyone knows that drug dealers make a lot of money, however you want to look at it, and wherever there is money to be made on drugs, there will be a black market to be dealt with, especially if there is increased demand associated with government-sanctioned addiction. This is already happening in Colorado. For example, there is a pending federal case involving $12 million in illicit drug money made from pot grown out of legal Colorado medical marijuana houses, but then transported via a businessman's co-opted skydive plane operation to the state of Minnesota illegally. At this time, 32 individuals are involved according to a 52-count indictment, and I have that report here. Thank you. Second, the bad example that would potentially be set for our youth by government leadership. This year, the executive branch changed its position on recreational marijuana even before hindsight could be 20/20, and that is truly to be applauded. I prefer that kind of example in government for our future leaders, and I know many who agree. Anyone can be deceived by the convincing false claims of the marijuana lobby. I know firsthand that those who palliate their pains in this world with anesthetizing drugs are adept at deceiving even themselves. And even more so, I know it is the family that suffers the most at the whims of a drug addict. Having dealt with the issue myself with my own brother. Still, he's my brother and always will be, and it is entirely appropriate that we care for our brothers and that we be our brothers' keepers. So it is in this vein that I must also state for the record that I believe putting the entire marijuana initiative on the ballot was a cowardly and misguided, if not self-serving initiative to begin with. Not in the best interest of the common good, even with the claim that the people made their choice. We as constituents will all have our individual opinions, but only you have the authority to lead in your office as you see fit day to day with a long view of the common good from the right spirit of the law. Mob rule will otherwise be what you can expect, and the mobsters will be younger and younger. Last year, the DEA reported that over 50% of Guam high school students had smoked marijuana in 2013, and I have that appendix as well. That statistic, the reality even before rollout of any government-backed marijuana program. The trend toward obtunded youth will only worsen when government legitimates marijuana-fueled escapism. Again, we need to be our brothers and our posterity's keepers and keep each other accountable to one another within the life of our community. Ultimately, the fruit of our efforts should be good overall if we have really been intent on establishing what is right. The opposite would also be true. For instance, Senator Tina Munya Barnes and those who helped push this bill to the ballot did not consult the Federal Authority on Controlled Drugs, the DEA, to get their input on the potential dangers of a medical marijuana program. Nor did they even consult the Guam Medical Association nor the Guam Medical Board. And this is according to the Guam Post report of October 27, 2014, entitled GMA Spots Flaws in the Marijuana Bill. Had they consulted the DEA, they might have had insight from the organization that, and now quote from the report, that due to an abundance of media attention surrounding claims of possible medical benefits, the general public has been introduced to contradictory and often inaccurate information regarding the legality and benefits of marijuana use. Also, that they might have discovered that there is a great risk of increased desire for more potent forms of the drug, which would and does tend to fuel traffic of other more potent drugs. For example, fentanyl-laced marijuana, which is happening stateside in the states that have legalized marijuana recreationally and or medically, and cannabis-laced MDMA and other novel psychotropic drugs, or that organized drug cartels start to form around big drug profits, which proponents welcome here. It's no surprise then that we, with this bad seed that's been planted in the last 20 years, I believe, that we are on the brink of a very bad harvest, bad fruit, unless greater minds prevail. Third, it's inorganic. Furthermore, the Marijuana Voter Initiative is not in keeping with federal law, and as legislators yourselves, it should be a priority for you to respect the overarching law of the land. If we enjoy the benefits of U.S. citizenship and its protections, we should be ready and willing to follow the law, and if we disagree with it, to follow orderly due process. Finally, it is of considerable significance that our current border control is hardly foolproof as well. The head of Guam Customs, James McDonald, recently acknowledged to the Guam Daily Post that there is clearly cause to believe that there are internal forces at work in the port where drug trafficking is concerned. He noted that by the time Guam Customs inspectors arrive to inspect some incoming vehicles, the glass has already been broken and the drug-diffing dogs start to alert to a suspicious scent, but the drugs are already gone. Guam has a long way to go toward addressing such gaping holes in our fences, where both the port and our prison is concerned, before even remotely considering en masse promotion of medical marijuana tourism. Perhaps we should consider drug testing port workers and others in government whose jobs pose a clear hazard to the public should they be intoxicated instead, and see where that leads first. The numerous recent positive methamphetamine drug tests of public servants in the Department of Public Works should also serve as a point of caution. Drugs are already far too pervasive in our community, and we do our youth a disservice by setting the bar so low for them, when I've seen for myself, and I'm sure many of the senators and other people who are professionals on Guam, in numerous career day events that I've seen so many of you at around the island, that these kids aspire to so much more. Thank you for your audience, and God bless you with his wisdom and understanding.
Sijus Masi, and thank you very much, Dr. Shiro. Mr. Savares?
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez, for allowing me to speak. I'm here as a patient, as an actual certified patient for Guam. It's been a very difficult road for me to even come out and speak, because of the level of reprisal, the fear of reprisal. We talk about patient focus and taking care of our own. If a plant that God bears the seed to and puts on this earth for us to plant and can bloom a flower that can heal, why are we stopping and not progressing forward? Over the last 10 months, I've been privileged to be one of these unicorns, these so-called, who really has a certification from Guam. And it gave me some sense of security to consume. Of course, safe, in a safe environment, secured. Within that 10-month period, I was on prior to switching over to medicinal cannabis, and not even getting the complete grades that I need, the indicas, the sativas, the hybrids, or the level of CBD versus THC that I properly need, because we don't have the proper facilities as of yet. But not even having that little hope, I've seen my liver functions tests. I've seen my liver functions, borderline liver failure, come to normality within a 10-month period. Same thing with my kidneys, my COPD. I haven't gone to the hospital in 10 months, and that's for COPD, and I'm inhaling this medication. As a combat vet, there's a huge initiative in the States through a group called Weed for Warriors. And if you ever get a chance, visit their page and look at all these soldiers, all these former service members who consume cannabis because of PTSD, because of the chronic pain. After we served and put our lives on the line for our great, not only our great island, but our great nation. At this point, 10 months, or I'm about to need to renew my certification, but now all the doctors are kind of hiding. Now I have to go back to conventional medication and watch these levels from the narcotics, from the morphines, from the opioids, start decreasing the way I function. I'm tired of being a zombie. Medical cannabis has allowed me to go back to school and deal with everything head on, and giving me refuge and the ability to tackle life as I need to. I'm not irresponsible. My bills are paid. I'm not doing crack cocaine, meth. And I'm still I feel like I'm a productive member of society. One major thing that I do ask is to add something in to educate the patients, and make that a requirement via pamphlet, via a 1-hour certification course through public health. I'm talking in regards to safe transport, to safe usage, to ensuring that we're not getting patients arrested because they thought, okay, I was in the jungle by the school. But of course the law says we cannot do that. Even though they're hiding in plain sight, I think that a lot of patients who, when everything finally stands up, need to be educated on the parameters of the laws that are going to be in place, or the restrictions of the laws that are going to be in place. And I urge, that is one thing that I have not seen indicated in any verbiage thus far. And I do hope something like that can be like a patient seminar, just because it will provide the patients will not have an excuse on if they're required, they won't have an excuse to say, hey, no, I didn't know. It's already within because I do believe in patient responsibility. Ultimately, it's the patient and the caregiver's responsibility to ensure that each patient, each individual is using cannabis in how it's supposed to be used, in a safe manner and in the right place. Thank you, Chairman. Have a good day.
John, thank you very much for your testimony, and again, thank you for your service to our island and our country. Thank you. Ms. Pelacani?
Chairman Rodriguez, thank you for the opportunity. I believe this will be our 14th public hearing on cannabis reform, but I'm not exactly sure because at this point I've lost count. And after 3 years, we have very little to show for it. Some of these issues have been addressed, but we would do our best to be as productive as possible. I know at times my tone may become frustrated, but I don't know how many times we are going to have to go through this process before our people see their mandate fulfilled. Our goal, again, is to continue pushing forward as patients still await safe access to the medicinal cannabis that they mandated over 3 years ago. After 3 years of this long, drawn-out process, I realized that there seems to be a major disconnect between the policy-making body and the regulating agency as prescribed in Public Law 33-220. Though a commission was set up to aid the process, after 1 year, no official meeting has taken place. It seems as though the people of Guam continue to get stuck between two branches of government. This is through minimal to no fault of the Guam legislature. As I have said many times before, for all your efforts, you cannot make an agency that resides under the executive branch follow or work within the framework of a law. We fully understand that only the governor or a court of law could do that. Our request for oversight, which has been denied to this point, was meant to address some of the core problems that has plagued the process. The issues are systemic and do not reside within the minute details of what is written in Bill 210. I urge the body to consider some solution to address the issues that continue to be brought forth by DPH-SS, manufactured or real. Mr. Gillen has made it abundantly clear that he does not want this program under his watch. We've been hearing this for 3 years now. And it seems as though he may continue to obstruct it until his term is up with no recourse for the people. I quote, "I get it about people in pain and wanting to look for health, but public health is just not the right place." This is a quote from Mr. Gillen. We are not sure where Director Gillen suggests this program resides, but we get the picture. He just doesn't want to do it. We ask that the drastic measures he has taken be met with solutions that have equal weight. Please provide us some guidance or a solution to resolve this once and for all. The people of Guam deserve a director that will comply with the laws that are written and passed by this body. If one man can say he doesn't want to follow the law and hold this program back from the people, then what is the purpose of law and where is the sanctity in it? The people of Guam deserve better than this and demand an answer and a solution. There is no ethics commission to investigate any concerns by the people of Guam with regard to the actions, statements, or conduct of DPH-SS, which has been obstructionist at best and insulting and unethical at worst. We can't pretend to know why the director continues to work outside the framework of the law, and making amendments to this law does not resolve the core problems. Making more rules does not address the fear-mongering from our medical leaders, nor the complete silence from our legal community, as well as the oversight chair. We still have heard no response on the legal matter. I can't believe this is the third time I have to say this, but for the record again, our patients cannot seek legal assistance. I do hope that this is the last time I have to say it, because it is unconscionable to see this unaddressed when there is simply no political will to hear the people of Guam as their rights continue to be trampled on. We still do not have a medical cannabis commission, which explains another incomplete attempt at rulemaking by the department. So I will ask again for the third time, where was the Department of Agriculture? Where was EPA? Where are the other stakeholders that need to be involved in this process of building a sustainable and healthy industry for our patients? Maybe we should park hearses at the various government agencies or simply add more posters to the one parked outside this building in order to get this message across that we have been testifying about for 3 years now. We will continue to do our best to push this program forward. We will continue to share our knowledge and lend assistance as best we can, but we humbly urge you to find solutions which seem to be political in nature and not about our patients at all. We have always understood that this was going to be a difficult and evolving process as we become more educated as a community, but we at least expected our government to work together to enact the will of the people. This, I guess, is a little too idealistic of me. With regard to the development of this current set of rules, we seem to have some of the same problems from the first two drafts authored by DPH-SS. We commend the work put into it, but we were never under the impression that DPH-SS should have had to do this on their own. They are not qualified to fully draft these rules without the input from the Commission with all the stakeholders at the table. We also acknowledge that doing it this way solely was at the discretion of the director, and we feel this is not in the best interest of the public. A year has gone by and no meeting from the Commission is pure disregard for the provision of law. Has DPHSS used any of the money appropriated to them to train their staff on medicinal cannabis or how to properly regulate this program, horticulture, pesticides, to get assistance to write proper rules? Or did we just copy and paste from other programs without guidance on what may work or not work within our statute or for our specific needs? Why am I so amazed when I contact people in our network that advise us of state regulators that invest in training and classes available stateside for people who are starting new programs? Contact any qualified educator and they will provide you a list of state regulators and policymakers, or those from foreign countries who sign up for classes or pay for trainers to help them set up their programs. This is not new and it is just common sense, but it seems just too much for our public servants to avail of. Our testimony today will address a few of the major concerns we have with Bill 210. With regards to a detailed markup, I think the recommended changes will need to come with guidance from the committee about the following items. Why DPHSS rewrote some of the major provisions of the law, as we understood that any regulations developed by the agency would have to be within what is prescribed by the current statute. Why DPHSS rearranged the entire framework of the law. Why DPHSS redefined some of the key words from the statute and left out some definitions that seem to have been neglected, as it seems some of this language was copied and pasted from some other program with some other enabling statute. Who advised on these changes? Is it someone qualified in cannabis policy, or was it just another copy and paste job? Since the statute was completely rearranged, it makes it difficult for us to determine how to resolve some of the conflict that was created. We will refer to Chairman Rodriguez to determine how to resolve some of this conflict at the markup and can address some of the questionable regulatory details at that time. We may not be objectionable to many of them. We may just have some questions. We are also concerned that one markup session may be insufficient, as the rules convoluted the law and may take some work to straighten out. Again, we defer to the committee for guidance on this. For today, we will address our major concerns. Director Gillen still has noted recently on media reports that he's confused about the equivalency for concentrates. Had he or anybody from the department participated in the process, instead of complaining about their rules being rejected for a year, he would have received access to this document that we are resubmitting. The equivalency documents? Okay. So we resubmitted an equivalency document. This document was sent to us by the Council on Responsible Cannabis Regulation and is the best research conducted to date about concentrate equivalency. The state of Colorado conducted research to determine what those equivalencies should be. Far be it from me to expect our health department to have the same kind of concern, but the word Google does come to mind. Although we received a copy of this document over a year ago, I Googled Colorado marijuana concentrate equivalency, and I was able to access the same document immediately. After 2 years, the director still poses the same question about equivalency when it took me 0.41 seconds clocked by Google to find the answer. It could be as simple as a definition for equivalency if it is a concern in the statute. But I defer to the original policy and the markup on that, as Senator Barnes was already advised on this matter. Senator Barnes saw fit to revise the allowable amount from a purchase limit to a possession limit. We support the possession limit in the current statute without a qualifying time period, purely for enforcement reasons. A dispensary cannot be expected to know what a patient is purchasing from dispensary to dispensary. While a seed-to-sale tracking system would be the ideal way to monitor inventory from a central database, without the consultation and proper research through some sort of RFI process, we do not have the means, nor do we have the expertise to shop for one until a commission could meet and determine our needs and the money is appropriated for it. Ultimately, I agree that this program should be regulated with the seed-to-sale tracking program. It is still in its infancy, with many systems continuing to be challenged by security and regulatory hurdles. Security concerns on patient data remains a major concern for us. We need to protect our patients from cyber attacks and unnecessary targeting, like being denied the right to own or purchase a gun, while still honoring the conditions of the Cole Memo. Hawaii is now matching up their databases and demanding patients turn in their guns. Grassroots Guam stands firmly against this type of violation of civil rights and will endorse any provisions supporting the protection of patient privacy, as we have since our very first testimony. This is why we urge for optional cards and not required ones from the very beginning, because we need to protect this data. While I think that an adult use program would deem a seed-to-sale tracking program extremely important, I don't feel that the need for one should continue to hold this medical program back. I feel that a 1 to 2 year plan by DPHSS with consult by the Commission to retain a service could be a realistic goal to procure and implement one. But this should not be a reason for the director to continue to delay this program, since proper record keeping is already required by regulation. He has already put it out in the media that this will be his next issue. Any information on suspected diversion that needs to be subpoenaed will be made available by every cannabis business should any enforcement issues arise. For the meantime, the onus cannot be on the dispensaries to enforce this purchase limit without knowledge of any other purchase activity, which would involve the sharing of proprietary information between dispensaries. This is not reasonable. If a tracking program were to be implemented, it should be monitored by trained and authorized regulators, and businesses will need to be able to make the investment in systems that are compatible. This will take time, but more than that, a concerted effort that doesn't seem to be happening right now. Cannabis businesses should be represented on the Commission and have input on this. The seat remains empty. Seed-to-sale tracking programs are fairly new and not without issues. They were introduced to help monitor the tracking of adult use sales due to the volumes of cannabis being cultivated in larger markets to prevent diversion across state lines. This is not necessary to implement in a medicinal program. Just this past week, MJ Freeway announced it had been the victim of cyber attacks, and this is not the first time, nor will it be the last. We are an island of 160,000 people with oceans for borders. Diversion without security at borders between legal adult use states and other states is far more of an issue on the continental United States than it is for us. This is what these tracking systems are designed to address. We also provided information on the cyber attack for you to review. The solution is simply to have patients sign waivers at every purchase and not acknowledging that they understand the possession limit and penalties for violating it, as well as information about illegal export. This could be required on every invoice or separate document with every purchase. The government can also use enforcement resources at our borders to mitigate any illicit export. Nothing changes at our borders except increased awareness. It's illegal to export anyway. It's been illegal and will be illegal for the foreseeable future. This is a feasible solution to get the program started. In Section 122504, a qualified patient is presumed to be engaged in the medical use of cannabis and shall not be subject to arrest, prosecution, or penalty in any manner for the possession of or for the medical use of cannabis if the qualified patient possesses a quantity of cannabis that does not exceed the allowable amount, is acting in accordance with all of the requirements of the law, and is in possession of a written certification. Therefore, any action taken against patients under the presumption that they are not engaged in medical use is clearly a violation of the very heart of this law. Our recommendation is to keep the allowable amount as was passed by the 33rd Guam Legislature enacted into law. This is the law today, and we feel that DPHSS changing the statute is well outside the parameters of what should be required of a regulatory agency, which will only cause further delay, this time indefinitely. Advertising and packaging. While I agree that advertising restrictions should be in place, a total ban on advertising is an unacceptable requirement for any industry, even the most regulated ones. DPHSS does not own the internet, and there are online mobile services that assist patients with finding doctors and dispensaries that have standards for protocol that they do abide by. These options are affordable for businesses and appeal to people who are already in the market to find the services they need. Companies should also not be prohibited from setting up a website or print appropriate marketing materials for themselves. A total ban on advertising is just not practical. How will patients find a dispensary that suits them? How will they find what strains are available? Who has the best prices? How will they even find a phone number or a location? More rules that lack basic common sense. Signage size limitations are acceptable, however, no graphics means potentially no logos. I understand you may not want flashing neon lights that say inappropriate things or have inappropriate pictures, as I am not unaware of a particular subculture that some dispensaries may want to appeal to. However, banning images completely is unreasonable. We are amenable to prohibiting the use of certain images. Research shows that advertising does not contribute to an increase in usage, even in adult use markets. We also provided that research to you. Meanwhile, we accept as a community large signs in the heart of our tourist district that may have highly inappropriate symbols, photos, or language, such as Club G Spot right down the hill from John F. Kennedy High School. We are not asking for a free-for-all. We are just asking for standards that are reasonable and sensible. We again remind everyone that we are talking about legal access to patients. Why would we impose such strict guidelines for patients and those that serve them when half-naked women and inappropriate references to anatomy are an acceptable form of advertising for alcohol and other industries right next to our schools? I think the advertising regulations should reflect the FCC guidelines to keep us shielded from violating federal law by any media regulated by the FCC. But this is already regulated and does not need to be addressed in local statute. I'm also not opposed to reasonable guidelines for responsible displays and marketing materials. I'm open to hear any suggestions, but as a marketer myself, I would prefer to defer to the chair for best discretion as long as the standards are fair. That's all we've been asking for since the very first public hearing. The only packaging requirement that we are opposed to is the requirement for opaque containers. Glass is the best form of packaging to minimize the degradation of product, but there are many other child-proof packaging options that are not opaque that businesses should be able to avail of to reduce the cost placed on patients. Another important reason to have clear containers is that patients need to see the color and quality of the medicine they are purchasing. These are not standardized pills. The patients need to view the product clearly at point of sale to determine what cannabis may meet their standard of quality. Hours of operation closed on Sundays, like what some conservative states do for alcohol. We don't even do that here. What would be the purpose of restricting medicine from patients on a Sunday or after 8 p.m.? Again, I ask, where did DPHSS copy some of these rules from? There doesn't seem to be the same level of concern for patients who get medicine at pharmacies versus those who get theirs from dispensaries. Access to medical cannabis should be the same as access to benzos, Vicodin, Oxy, or any other medication out there. The difference being at a pharmacy, anybody can pick up anybody's prescriptions. Our cannabis program does not allow for that unless registered as a caregiver at Department of Public Health. Again, far more restrictive. It seems pretty plain to me that someone copied this off an adult use program. If there are regulatory practices in place for pharmacies, we simply ask that the same standards be implemented here for hours of operation. Serving size of 10 milligram THC with packages not to exceed 100 milligrams THC. This is an adult use application and has no place in a medicinal cannabis program. This is an egregious display of the lack of fundamental knowledge of medicinal cannabis. By regulating a serving size so small in a medical market, you just increase the cost of everyone's medicine. It's just flat ignorance on full display. A 10 milligram serving size would force a cancer patient or any other patient with chronic conditions to consume up to 100 servings a day. Yes, a simple change in language, and we are here to address it, but the premise is still the same after 3 years. We need the knowledge and training of full-time employees who understand medicinal cannabis to avoid this seemingly simple mistake that could have had far-reaching consequences. Lab standards and pesticide regulations. Pesticide standards are subpar. One tab for acceptable levels of pesticides in the lab standards, yet we have provided numerous documents regarding the issues that surround pesticides. One can only wonder why the director would choose, with the documents he was given, to pay virtually no attention to probably what could be the single greatest threat to the cannabis industry today, the inability to test pesticides on the actual plants. Again, we are asking for the assistance of the Department of Agriculture. We had the pleasure of bringing a cultivation consultant to answer some questions they may have had. To our surprise, the invitation they received from Senator Barnes was the first time they had been asked to the table. So for the third time, I will ask again, why is the Department of Agriculture not being called upon to have input on what they have the expertise to advise on? I don't have the expertise to be able to make the best recommendations, but an inquiry can be made to the CRCR for assistance. I am also submitting documents to assist, which is some of the approved and banned pesticides that are currently standard as right now in Colorado. Again, these are not tested. These are just best practice. Again, the biggest issue surrounding the cannabis industry today is that the pesticides cannot be tested on cannabis plants, as the federal government has not budged on this yet. Because of the different methods of consumptions, it is best to be cautious. Biggest mistake the industry made was to adopt pesticide standards for agricultural products. However, not realizing that some pesticides, when smoked or combusted, became dangerous where simple ingestion would have been acceptable. The director was fully made aware of this, yet you wouldn't be able to tell based on the reading of these rules. With regards to the other lab standards, we are not qualified to testify on these. However, we urge the committee to seek consult with the CRCR. Reciprocity. We commend the courage and foresight of the chairman to remove the residency requirement. I believe this will go a long way to reduce the burden of cost of medicine across the board and bring back some of the medical tourism money we continue to send off island. We fully support this effort. However, we do have one request. We humbly ask for the committee to consider reciprocity. We have many people visiting family. We have a patient tonight that's testified. We have sick patients traveling back and forth between Guam and the mainland and new residents moving in. It would go a long way for patients who have been accustomed to their treatment to continue their supply of cannabis when coming to Guam. We had a 9-year-old patient that had come to Guam from San Diego with a form of severe epilepsy. She should have been able to keep an uninterrupted supply of medicine without risking her life and having to go through another process of bringing her medical files and establishing another doctor-patient relationship. These requirements would have required more of a cost burden to these already established patients. But she and her parents risk her life in order for her to visit her home. This should not be happening. We also have many cancer patients that have received treatment off island who return home that should be able to just avail of the program with their existing cards. Courier services. DPHSS rules outlaw courier services to patients, but this was not restricted in the statute. If this was not the intention, the merits of patient courier services should be debated. We are proponents for any policy that allows better patient access. We also recognize that many patients would prefer discretionary delivery services, as there is still a moral stigma placed upon them and job security issues at this time. Until these issues are resolved, we are opposed to the elimination of courier services to patients. Residency requirements in the bill, it just needs to address the removal of the requirement in the registry card portion of the rules. Enforcement and deadline to stand up the program. Is DPHSS prepared to enact these rules if passed into law? They wrote these regulations, but assuming they would be prepared to enact them is an entirely different question. They are still not issuing registry cards, despite being in violation of the law. Patients should never have been denied their registry cards, as it provides them legal protections, and these protections are in place today. This violates the very essence of why this law is in place. I fear for many patients, as the Mandana Drug Task Force is out in full force. As long as this government continues to promote this climate of fear in our community, patients will continue to seek their medicine illicitly. This is counterintuitive to what we are trying to achieve here. Is there any way to put some enforcement and deadline on these rules? There should be no further delays. We urge you to find creative solutions, as the many promises of home cultivation as a stopgap have still yet to be realized. In conclusion, I would like to commend the Division of Environmental Health for the hard work that they've done. This draft of rules far exceeds the first 2 drafts. I would like to note the beauty of the process as it's taken place. We have all learned tremendously during this process, although it has taken too long. Senator Barnes and Senator Rodriguez did a tremendous job in strengthening the statute, which has been preceded by this next great effort by the staff at DPHSS. I would just like to urge everyone who is a part of this process to continue to work toward our ultimate goal. This program will never be perfect. It will be ever-changing. Even today, just about every legal program has multiple bills being introduced by their state governments as they continue to learn from past mistakes to make the program better. It's going to be a while and take an act of Congress until some of these issues are addressed seamlessly. But until that time, we must work together as a community to get safe access to our patients urgently. Thank you, Senator, for your time.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for your testimony tonight, and for really your work and the efforts you've put in over the years. I really appreciate that. I know you said this is your 14th time.
I believe so.
I'm hoping and praying that at least you have the 15th, which is the next public hearing. That'll be the last time.
Right.
You know, that you'll have to testify, and then we'll get this program stood up. Okay, so I thank you for that. We do have one more individual. Or is there anyone else besides Mr. Fest that wishes to testify? I would invite you to please come forward. Mr. Fest?
Please don't take the first two paragraphs personally. It addresses of how more than who. So thank you for allowing me to testify. I do have a breaking point somewhere in there, like halfway. Maybe I can split this up, second hearing, whatever. I'll let you make the call. But the total is 40 minutes. Bill 21034, testimony. Starting with the first sentence of the introduction of this introduced Bill 210, it states, the Director of the Department of Public Health is mandated pursuant to 10 GCA Division 1, Chapter 12, Part 2, Article 25, to promulgate rules and regulations as necessary to implement the Joaquin KC Conception II Compassionate Cannabis Use Act of 2013, also known as the Medical Marijuana Program. The preceding statement is not factual. It would have been factual had it not been amended. In the original Bill 215-32, the Director was mandated to promulgate rules, but the first and second draft rules were rejected by the passed Bill 345-33. The new bill was passed and lapsed into the current Public Law 33-220, wherein the majority of the rulemaking authority was not given to the Director or within the Department of Health. The major purposes of having the current Public Law 33-220 was to remove the majority of rulemaking out of the hands of the Director and the Department of Health. The majority of the rules and regulations were written within the law as it specifies the very few areas the Director and the Department of Health are given for rulemaking. In the second sentence of the introduction, it states, the rules and regulations include the process of obtaining registry identification cards by a qualified patient, primary caregivers, responsible officials, designated couriers, the process for obtaining medical cannabis license to permit and operate by cultivation facilities, commercial manufacturing facilities, medical cannabis dispensaries, and medical cannabis testing laboratories. Procedures for the reporting on destruction of disposal of marijuana and marijuana products, and the required standards to operate a medical cannabis testing laboratory. The preceding sentence would have been factual had it stated limited to rather than include, as in Public Law 33-220, subsection 1225065 states the Medical Cannabis Regulation Commission shall advise the Department on the development of the standards and regulations pursuant to this article, including the best practices and guidelines, to ensure qualified patients have adequate access to medical cannabis and medical cannabis products, and 6, submit policy recommendations to the Legislative Committee on Health and Human Services. To review, ensure adequate access, not impede business from being able to provide access. The detailed areas of rulemaking stated in the sentence are explicitly and exclusively given to the Director and the Department. All other areas of rulemaking already not specified within Public Law 33-220 are given to the Commission and only to the extent what is pursuant within the Act. The procedures prescribed within Public Law 33-220, this entire bill was drafted totally without the involvement of any of the Commission and totally outside what is prescribed by law. The Commission has not been fully seated or established, no chairperson elected, has not officially met, whose responsibility it is to ensure the Commission is established is not fully clear to me or explicitly stated. Of this bill, subsection 1002, 10002 of this introduced bill, authority is also misleading and non-factual, as it states, authority. The Director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services is authorized to adopt rules and regulations to carry out the provisions of this Act pursuant to 10 GCA Chapter 3, subsection 3106. To let us clarify, subsection 3106 states, rulemaking, the Director shall, in accordance with the administrative adjudication law, adopt, amend, repeal rules and regulations necessary to fulfill the duties of the division. The operative and limiting words in subsection 3106 are in accordance with and necessary. This Bill 210 is neither in accordance nor necessary to fulfill the duties of the division. According to Public Law 33-220, in which this Bill 210-33 attempts to amend, is all outside the current laws, except for what is actually stated and specified in Public Law 33-220. This bill, all rules contained within, were drafted all by the Director. As Senator Rodriguez stated on the radio, he was unaware of the content. Again, the only areas of rulemaking given to the Director were registry card protocols, registry cards, protocols to obtain permits, laboratory testing standards, and the disposable medical cannabis and products. In Public Law 33-220, subsection 122512, operation standards, it specifies rules that the businesses must follow. And L, the licensed medical cannabis business shall develop standard operating procedures, protocols, and training for the safe handling and dispensing of medical cannabis to include 1. Storage protocols, 2. Reasonable security protocols, 3. Inventory control, and 4. Distribution systems. It does not state the Director nor the Commission shall develop operating procedures and protocols. It states the business shall develop. Had the Director stayed within his lane and concentrated on the areas he was mandated to create rules for, we would be much further ahead, but he wasted almost another whole year again, and here we are again trying to dissect and sort through the convoluted menagerie of unnecessary rules and regulations designed to expand expense and further inhibit business so he can forestall any progress until he leaves office. As in the most recent news article of 1127, and he said it here today, quotes the Director saying, I'm begging him to give it to somebody else. But public health is just not the right place. It meaning anything to do with medical cannabis, and him meaning Senator Rodriguez, chairperson of the Committee on Health. As I've said many times in many places, doing the same things the same way with the same people, you will get the same results. Medical only, I would love to kill, as it proves to be a most unswallowable pill. Adult use boast, it's an easy coast down a regulatory hill. Guam, wake up. To borrow a phrase from the Director, this bill is most substantively fluff and nonsense. I would dub it as an ego repair bill or another stall tactic. As the Director printed and hand-delivered the former CNMI adult use bill to K57 and went on air more than a year ago suggesting we follow suit and bypass medical cannabis. I recorded the on-air promotion. I suspect the director's motivation was to alleviate his burden and responsibility for a medical cannabis program. I also suspect it was at his pleas and encouragement the governor introduced Bill 834 for adult use cannabis. I will be reiterating this same notion throughout this testimony, as we have a very small population and the potential business investors have already been teased with much lower fees and an ultimately much more substantial and immediate customer base with the Governor Calvo's Bill 834. I am also begging this legislative body to dust off, tweak, and reintroduce that bill simultaneously while we muddle and stumble along with medical only. Home cultivation would be a good stopgap and in-between solution for patient access, as it will be the only access to the medicine other than the black market until we have an adult use law. As without any fundamental and substantial changes made within Public Law 33-220, we will get absolutely nowhere, but very slowly. Notwithstanding the rules of laws, I will attempt to address sections and rules within this fallaciously conceived and substantively unnecessary content of Bill 210-34. Though I wonder why I bother, as all I point out, as in the past, will be ignored, and yet again, we still have an unworkable frame on which to proceed upon. Before I begin on the details of this bill, have there been any changes or additions to this bill since it's introduced, or any difference? Okay. 10003 definitions. I won't read the whole thing, but you know where I'm going with this one. B, the allowable amount. Means the amount of cannabis in any form approved by the department, possessed by a qualified patient, or collectively possessed by a qualified patient and a qualified patient's caregiver, to be no more than reasonably necessary to ensure the uninterrupted availability of cannabis that is derived solely from an intrastate source. The allowable amount shall consist of an amount not to exceed 2.5 ounces of dried prepared cannabis purchased from a dispensary every 30 calendar days. It used to be 2.5, now it's 30 days. The qualified patient may request an increased allowable amount of medical cannabis and products from the department. I'd like to go right to the department and get it, but no. On a provided form, provided that the qualified patient provides a valid reason for legitimate needed support by a practitioner's recommendation. The allowable amount shall be reviewed by the Regulation Commission. This definition is one of the most, if not the most, disputed and contested definitions. It started out as an adequate supply in Bill 215-32 and cited as a 3-month supply. In the department's second draft rules, it changed to an allowable amount and was 2.5 ounces stated separately at a dispensary may dispense no more than amount every 14 days. So it's two different sentences, 2.5 ounces, and then separately stated 2.5 ounces at a dispensary every 14 days. Acquire was defined by the department as means to obtain through any type of transaction and from any source. In Bill 343, the first two iterations was 2.5 ounces every 14 days and stated separately for a dispensary. It ended as two sentences, and the second sentence stated, the allowable amount shall consist of an amount not to exceed 2.5 ounces of dried or prepared cannabis purchased from a dispensary. There has been much dispute over what that second sentence actually means, as I and the director read two different meanings from the same words. The directors and others read it as a rule for patients. Conversely, I and others read it as a rule for a dispensary, as the patients are not mentioned in the sentence, only the dispensary is mentioned. I have sought clarification from the Guam Legislative Council through a sitting senator, the Office of Public Accountability, the Vice Speaker, the AG with no opinions. By chance, I crossed paths with former Senator Tina Meena Barnes, the sponsor of the now lapsed law, and we discussed this sentence in detail, and she confirmed the sentence does not, was not, or ever to suggest the acquisition of cannabis by a qualified patient is confined to a dispensary. As stated in the definition, necessary to ensure the uninterrupted supply of cannabis. The legislative intent of this definition must be upheld. How could it have been thought as any other way, as this bill was followed by a Home Cultivation Bill 344-33? Again, we need a home cultivation bill, as it will be the only method for a patient to have access to the medicine other than the black market until an adult use cannabis law comes to pass. Common sense would have had definitions as possession limits and stated separately or equal with a purchase per month limit. With Bill 210, the amount has been cut in half to 2.5 ounces every 30 days. I suggest we go back to the original 2.5 ounces every 14 days, or straight up just 2.5 ounces as the possession limit. Leave it there. 4 1-gram doses daily would be 4.3 ounces. So that's back to your 2.55 ounces every 30 days. Oils and edibles would require more. The patient should only need the practitioner's recommendation on the form for an increased amount, as the commission is not established, non-existent, and even if it did exist, only required to meet twice yearly. H, canopy, means the surface area utilized to produce medical cannabis plants, calculated in square feet and measured using the outside boundaries of any area that includes mature cannabis plants, including all the space within the boundaries. This definition will also cause much confusion and much contention, as I see it as the basis of huge lawsuits, as the fees are also huge. And the very expensive space is very small, and it is the first potential failure point of a whole chain of interdependent businesses. The first point of contention is area utilized to produce mature cannabis plants. A conscientious and efficient cultivator, but strapped with high fees, would literally take this to mean only areas with mature plants in flowering, as the written words state. Areas with immature plants not in flowering would not be counted and calculated as canopy. Conversely, the prohibitionist regulator would think and take this to mean all areas that include plants, because the way a regulator thinks, eventually they will all become mature at some point in time. However, plants can be kept immature indefinitely at the will of the cultivator. Imagine a room full of surrogate females dedicated to taking clones from and never to become mature, flowering, or harvested. The second point of contention would be noticeably measured using the outside boundaries of any area that includes mature cannabis plants. What specifically constitutes an outside boundary or an area? The property line, the outside wall of a building or a fence, the wall of a room, a section of plants in containers outside, the boundary of a tray table? Again, any area that includes mature cannabis plants, including the space within the boundaries. As a typical indoor conventional commercial grow room would be set up with tray tables and with minimal aisle walk spaces in between the tables and walls, less than half the room would actually contain plants, but could be construed as the entire room be calculated as canopy. Conversely, if just the outside boundaries of the tray table were calculated, then only the actual area space utilized in containing mature cannabis plants in the flowering stage of growth would be calculated as canopies. The words are simple, but again, they can have two different meanings depending on your perspective, your motive, your wallet, or a regulator's whim. Traditionally, canopy is measured from leaf tip to leaf tip of a plant or group of plants. This definition needs extensive analysis review reconciliation, and reformation. Commercial cultivation facility, that is L, means a licensed business that plants, grows, harvests, dries, cures, grades, trims medical cannabis products for qualified patients. An applicant should be able to own more than one cultivation site, as the business or market should require. Within this definition, it specifies that medical cannabis will be grown. The actual definition says commercial cultivation facilities. It is only logical the name should be a medical cannabis commercial cultivation facility, not to be confused with the soon-to-come adult-use cannabis cultivation facilities. The fees are specified hugely different, $50,000 versus $5,000. So I made this suggestion at the hearing before Bill 6934 became law. Vice Speaker Talahi thought it was a good idea to make the changes for all medical cannabis businesses, as confusion and chaos will ensue at GRT once adult use cannabis becomes a reality. The changes were ignored by the sponsor and the Vice Speaker before the vote. The same deficit and inconsistency is also apparent with all listed medical cannabis businesses in subsection 10004 fees. As in Public Law 33-220, except for the laboratory, which is actually named a medical cannabis testing laboratory, which ironically could service both medical and adult use cannabis businesses. Renaming or relabeling all these businesses throughout Public Law 33-220 and all associated bills and laws will not only be warranted, but also prudent, as the changes will become necessary at some point in time. AAA, practitioner, means a person licensed on Guam to prescribe and administer drugs that are subject to the Guam Uniform Controlled Substances Act and possess a valid Guam Controlled Substance registration. A practitioner shall not be a doctor of veterinary medicine or practice veterinary medicine. This definition needs change to include all types of practitioners, excluding veterinarians, and not be limited to the ones who possess a valid Guam Controlled Substance registration. The recommendation is not a prescription, and therefore should not be limited to only those who prescribe controlled substance medication. Chiropractors deal with patients with pain and also sell herbal supplements at their office. Naturopathic and homeopathic practitioners should also be included. Oriental and acupuncture practitioners should also be included to recommend cannabis. All should be included to recommend cannabis, as we have a great deficit of practitioners willing to even consider the option. And again, it is not a prescription. The heads of GMA and GMS are still fear-mongering doctors in the medical community and the public with claims of doctors losing their license and claiming that cannabis is not medicine. Why should a patient be limited to these types of practitioners for a recommendation? This assertion and argument is logical and reasonable and must be considered. Another very important consideration should be given to the patients are having and or obtaining a valid recommendation from a U.S. mainland practitioner, and that can be reasonably verified. Again, we have a great definition of willing practitioners on Guam to consider recommending cannabis for medical use. Yet another very important consideration should be given to the Department of Public Health to provide and post on the medical cannabis webpage monthly updated totals per practitioner, names only, that have provided written certifications for the medical use of cannabis. I was able to get them to do that for the first few months, then they changed policy. I've been fighting it ever since. It may not be required in Public Law 33-220 for Department of Health to provide totals per practitioner, names only, to be disclosed. However, it is permitted in the law stated in subsection 122.525E4 under HIPAA, number 4, as provided in the Federal Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. There's like a dozen reasons why they say you can release information, not only of a patient, but a facility, a doctor. One of them is the benefit of the public health. As it is a public health interest and a public health need for patients to know which practitioner are not opposed to providing a written certification for the medical use of cannabis. To deny patients this information is truly unethical. Like me, that's why I'm a California patient. I'm not going to go from doctor to doctor to doctor to get no, and all of a sudden I got $2,000 out of pocket and I got no recommendation. I ain't going to play that game. AEE, public place. Number 1, public place means a location, facility, or venue that a public is invited or in which the public is permitted but is not intended for regular, exclusive, or use of an individual or a specific group of individuals. This definition and designation should be changed to not include a privately owned, closed, non-moving vehicle that is not in traffic, no matter its location, as to allow and afford a patient a safe place to access and use the medicine at any time, day or night. This location should also be added to the list of exemptions because it's private property. It's a closed vehicle. Getting real close to a place. The definition and declaration should be to include private property. Okay. QQQQ, 3 Qs. Written certification means a statement of qualified patient medical records. As addressed and recommended in the definitions of AAA practitioner, this definition designation to be changed to allow all types of practitioners, as I formerly stated, and written certifications from the United States that can reasonably be validated. I'm a valid California medical cannabis patient, and my recommendation with the card and practitioner can be verified 24/7 via the internet or telephone, much better and easier than we have here on Guam currently available to us or anything near in the future. We are 3 years and $300,000 into this. There is no excuse. Any U.S. patient with a reasonably verified recommendation should be included without the need of a Guam practitioner. Right here is where I'll stop. 10004 fees. 1 and 2, C and D. Responsible officials and designated couriers' registration card fees should be no more than a designated caregiver, as the businesses are already being fleeced with the enormously high fees and extensively scrutinized with the application process. Even if the business fees were reasonable, registry cards for a business should also be reasonable. $1,000 for an identification card is far from reasonable. In the interest of the conservation of time and for the consideration of others who also wish to speak and give testimony, I will not continue line by line on this bill here and now, and for me to do so would take a week or more, and I'll hold it there and finish the rest of it. That's probably like more than halfway, and I can finish that at the next hearing.
Great, thank you.
That way I won't have to write something up again.
Great, thank you very much, sir. And if you provide that to us, we'll ensure that we take that into consideration, included in the committee report. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to provide any oral testimony? If not, the committee will recess this hearing until December 14th at 2 p.m. Here at the Guam Congress Building. And again, we do have a markup meeting scheduled for December 7th, this Thursday at 1 p.m. at my offices in Timuning. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.